All right, let's talk about Resident Evil 4 Remake because I just got done spending some time with it here for the first time. And what I did was pick it up a bit early on the Xbox and move to New Zealand for the day so that I could try it out a bit earlier and have some more put together thoughts for it. I even thought about doing like my first hour of play for the immediate thoughts, but then I realized that would just be the demo. Anyway, my plan was to play it for an hour or two and then kind of give some of my impressions, and then a couple of hours turned into several hours, and now I'm more than halfway done the game in the first sitting. So I wanted to stop for a moment and give my impressions before I just went on and completed the game because, let's be real, Resident Evil 4, this game that just released, certainly proves one big thing, and we're going to discuss that here today. So if you guys enjoy the video, make sure you like it and subscribe if you're new, as we're on our road to 700,000 subscribers. So because I did pick it up early, I ended up getting it on the Xbox. I was between that or the PlayStation, and more leaning towards the PlayStation because of the PSVR 2 support. So I know I'm going to end up picking the game up again on the PlayStation side, but with the Xbox, I get a bit early, and I really wanted to play the game on Thursday, so here we are. But let's kind of discuss some of Resident Evil 4 Remake here, and the footage I'll show you, I recorded from like the first two and a half hours of the game. I was getting to points where I'm like, you know what, I feel like I'd be kind of annoyed if I had that part spoiled for me, and then that part. Even if you've played through Resident Evil 4 many times and you're just like an expert at it, there are some scenes that have been recreated, we'll say, in the RE engine that is jaw-dropping at times, and I don't really want to take that away from anyone, but let's start from the top here. Yes, this is a game that people were a bit concerned about, is what I'll say, because Resident Evil 4, as it stands now, is a classic, and for some people, it's their favorite game, like, of all time. For me, it's certainly in my top 10, but I'm not like the big Resident Evil 4 expert who's played through the game 20 times or something. I've played through the game multiple times. The original game, or the original version on the GameCube, loved it. It was such a cool transition for that entire series. Yes, it became more of an action game, less of a scary game, but it was just such a fun game to play through. I then played it again on the Wii because that introduced at least kind of the pointer controls that made the game feel completely different. Then I revisited again. It was during the Xbox 360 PS3 generation, and I think it might have been on the Xbox 360. But nonetheless, I also played it more recently on the Quest 2 in VR. It was very cool to see that, which is one of the reasons I want to check it out on the PSVR 2. But when we started hearing about the remake, there were concerns. What are they going to change in that original classic game that could potentially backfire? Well, I'm here to tell you that Capcom, so far from what I've played, has done an incredible job with this. I really like kind of the approach to this, going from, okay, this is more of it's a campy, lighthearted horror game, if that makes sense, to one that is, I mean, just a massive tonal shift from that original title. I mean, once you start it up, you're in just an overall darker environment. Instead of having you go through in the daytime there initially to that first house, it's just like pitch black night, and they did a great job with that opening house that you're going through. Tons of detail everywhere, and that's the part you could experience in the demo. So after you get up through the village where all the enemies are attacking, you feel overwhelmed, then it's capped off with his question of where's everyone going? Bingo. You then go into the full game. So the first 20 or 30 minutes that I would have shown anyway would have been the demo that a lot of people would have played. But after we get beyond that, I started to notice that this game definitely opens up the original source material completely. There appears to be just more story beats going on here with things that you find or kind of conversations that are going on. But as I'm going through the paths that they have, the areas that they've laid out, just seems like there's a lot more to do. Yeah, there are different paths you can take and ways that you can get around the enemies to not even alert them at all. There's sort of a stealth kind of mechanic to it where you can crouch down and sneak around corners and try to take out the different Ganado without them even seeing you. And that's with your trusty knife that, yes, breaks a lot, but you want to keep it repaired or even keep like kitchen knives on you, because that thing, it's like the most powerful weapon known to man right now. There are chainsaws that we saw in the previews that you can block, and yeah, that is a consistent thing going forward, as you have the ability to parry with the knife, and it is incredibly satisfying, which sort of just plays into the combat overall. Now, you're not really just perched to one spot when you start firing. You can strafe and move around as you are shooting. So what I noticed were the different enemies that will throw the axes at you or anything, you can just sort of sidle out of the way as you're still shooting them. That has become much less of a threat, because before you would either stop and try to get out of the way real quick, or you would just shoot that out of the air. Now it's just way easier to dodge those. But in turn, the enemies just appear much more aggressive. They get on you very, very quickly. They will flank you. They will just run straight at you. And if you miss one shot, they got the pitchfork right in your chest. So that, coupled with the overall darker and scarier environment, does make you feel overwhelmed, but also stressed pretty consistently. I also noticed that ammo, while at times it feels incredibly plentiful, when you're going through combat or just a longer time period where you're fighting enemies, you start to kind of run out of ammo, and there's sort of that panic of, oh, what do I do if I just have a couple of flash grenades or something? Can I throw them and then run up and kick them real quick and run past them? Maybe I can get a drop for some gunpowder to then combine it, and you're consistently on the fly thinking about ways to get around certain situations in front of you. Oh, and the kick, the melee, all that is just, it just hits so hard. You kick one of the enemies, and if they're near a door or a wall, they'll just go face first into it, and they just crack right up against it. You just pancake them completely into it. It's just, all of it just feels very impactful. And while this is going on, Leon still has the lines that it feels like everything around him is incredibly serious, and he says, he kicks him in the face, and he's like, oh, it must have slipped or something there. So they just still have that tongue-in-cheek nature to Leon, where it feels like he's taking none of this seriously as he's just mowing down enemies left and right. Visually speaking, the RE engine just keeps delivering. I've seen that on the PC, it looks significantly better overall. Like, it's just native resolution. People are hitting 100 some odd frames per second, no problem. On the Xbox, I think it looks good. I mean, we are to a point where games in general just all look really good, but the RE engine just continues to impress, more so with its ability to set the mood and environment as opposed to, I guess, the character model. Like Leon, when I first saw him and the camera swung around to his face, I was kind of like, oh, okay, that looks a little strange, but you get used to it, and I think for the most part, in performance mode, it's been satisfactory. You can move it into like ray tracing with hair strand on, and the frame rate kind of takes a dive, but for the most part, the only issue I've had with the Xbox version, and it appears to just be the Xbox version from what I've heard, the dead zone on the sticks for some reason are incredibly vague, and I'm not really sure why. So if you're using the right stick, for example, when you're aiming around, you have to actually move it further from the center than you'd expect to get any kind of movement out of the cursor. And it's not really an issue when you're just looking around, but when you're trying to do fine-tuned aiming, it does become a problem because you end up pushing the stick too far, and your character will just, the cursor will just accelerate past the enemy's head or something. When I'm using the rifle with the scope, that's when it was much more obvious, as opposed to if I was using like anything automatic or a shotgun or something. So it was more so when you're just trying to pinpoint different shots, and it was pretty noticeable. They do still have like side quests and different things you can do there, but as well as a challenges menu. So as you do different runs through the game, that will compile points outside of each run, and you can buy models and items and concept art. So there is a reason to consistently be playing through this game, and I think it's something specifically that newcomers will really get a kick out of, because other Resident Evil games, they do, especially like Village and stuff, they do try to push you to go through the game multiple times. So while Resident Evil 4 isn't exactly a long game, it's one that you could probably get 4 or 5 playthroughs out of pretty easily, and all of a sudden you stack 40 or 50 hours. You do eventually get to a point where you have a companion in the game, Ashley, and it basically turns into a long escort mission for the game, right? But from what I've seen so far, Ashley hasn't really gotten in the way much. You can obviously give her commands to get close to you, wait here, that sort of thing. It's very similar, I feel like, to the original one, where they basically made her try to stay out of the way, but she can still get grabbed or knocked down or anything. And there is a sense of danger when she gets picked up and you're still kind of under attack from other Ganados or maybe a larger brute or even someone with a chainsaw. So once again, just kind of adds to the stress and terror of the whole thing. They also mentioned that they took out all the QuickTime events, or almost all of them. There were still a few that I encountered, but certainly not as many at all, really, as I remember with the original one. The other thing that they seem to have added in are puzzles. There are some puzzles in here that I do not remember from the original one, and this is something I probably should have done. I should have done a playthrough of the original Resident Evil somewhat recently. It's been a little while since I've played through Resident Evil 4, so while I know the different story beats and obvious events that happen to where I'm recognizing them in Resident Evil 4 Remake, kind of the beat-to-beat action in areas I don't remember as well. So there are probably little puzzles that maybe I'm seeing again and not remembering, but I feel like there are new ones here that were not in that original version. It's hard not to recommend this game, even if you've never played Resident Evil before. I think you could jump into this one and just have an absolute blast. When Capcom made the shift over to being more of an action arcade style game, especially with the change in camera, there were concerns, but then the game comes out and it was really good. And I think it's just gotten better even. Like, seriously, they've done a lot of work with this for Resident Evil 2 Remake, Resident Evil 3 Remake, and it's just built up to what's really looking like the pinnacle of Resident Evil Remake titles. I guess they could do some other ones in the future and they could be just as good or better, but just based on the source material with Resident Evil 4 and what they've learned over the last couple of titles, this feels like the peak, I would say, for Capcom with the Resident Evil Remake series. And it goes to show one thing. The GameCube is unstoppable. Let's be real, okay? Metroid Prime Remastered comes out, and 95 on Metacritic. Resident Evil 4 Remake comes out, 93 on Metacritic. It's just, you're pulling from the correct generation here, and you're making sure to avoid, dodge the N64 generation, because come on, let's be real. We all know the GameCube is better than Nintendo 64, and we don't need Resident Evil 4 Remake to show up and tell us that, but they kicked the door in anyway just to remind us. So it's, hey, Resident Evil 4 Remake, it's here. I recommend it. Go check it out. But let me know what you guys think about this one down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.